a retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. Welcome to the interview room, everybody. What an amazing Sunday evening show we've got ahead for you here. It's a Mother's Day special. By golly, we want to thank all of our moms, wherever you are, all you moms who may be watching tonight. Thank you so much for just the gift of life and just the love that you have brought to this world with your own children and, of course, hopefully with your grandchildren. We also want to remember those who don't have their moms around them at this time. This can also be a very, emotional time for them. And so we want to be sensitive to that, as well as other potential moms who can't have children. So we love you all. We're grateful for each and every one of you. We're thankful that you chose to have us when we were brought into this world. And so happy Mother's Day, and also happy Mother's Fur Baby Days, because there are moms out there that love their fur babies just as much as others. And of course, to our wonderful mods. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but we have the best mods on YouTube. And by golly, we've got another one. We want to welcome Laura Waldy. She, and I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Laura, but she is our newest mod. And so she joins the team with Teresa M, Maui Girl, and Mimi J2. And we also always want to remember Miss Sophia. We love you. I know you're watching us from Canada. Happy Mother's Day to you as well, kiddo. And of course, to our first responders, our nurses, our doctors, anybody out there in the field who's working on this wonderful Mother's Day. Thank you. Our veterans around the world and within this country, those moms who are missing those children, we want to recognize you and acknowledge you. Well, as you can tell, I've got my dear friend, Dr. Gary Brucato, with us tonight. Josh from the lab was going to be here, but he got tied up, so we want to excuse him, but at any time he could jump in. I told him when he gets free, just feel free to jump in and join the conversation here. We want to also congratulate and thank all of our subs. Thank you so much for always supporting the interview room. We are so grateful for you. We can't do this without you. And of course, our Patreon members. We just have the utmost respect and thanks for you as well. But as you can tell, I've got my dear friend, Dr. Brucato, over here. And for those of you who are maybe new to our channel, hopefully you are, and welcome here. We only ask one thing, that you hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so you get all those notifications, and that you share this out with all of your social media networks. Dr. Gary Brucato is a visiting scholar at Boston College, where he collaborates with Dr. Ann Burgess and Dr. Victor Petrecka on forensic research. His studies, among other things, he studies, among other things, how violent thoughts and actions emerge in psychotic versus non-psychotic persons. He's the co-author of the Columbia University Mass Murder Database, which is the largest mass murder database in the world, with over 119 years of data attached to that. He's also the co-author of this amazing book. If you've not heard about this book, get to Amazon, buy it. But even better yet, go over to our new podcast called The Witness Box. And our last episode was about how this book has emerged forward in our society. It's 22 categories of some really, really bad stuff, but in a good way, because he studied the understanding of the emergence of modern violent crime. And as you can imagine, tonight's going to be an amazing show. Whenever we can tap into Dr. Brucato's mind and just pull some of those nuggets out, I am always really, really excited to have him here. He's one of the brightest minds, quite frankly, in the world in forensic psychology, and I'm just so grateful to be his friend. And so, Dr. Brucato, welcome to the program this evening. How are you? How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Got to spend some time with my mother and my maternal grandmother. So it was of a very advanced age. So it was really a lot of fun to get to see them and to give them a nice Mother's Day. And how is Karen?
She's doing great. We had a marvelous. I took her out yesterday, and she bought a really neat little present, and she said I bought it for her, but she picked it out. And
The smartest way to do it.
yeah, and by the way, thank you so much for your kind email this morning. This is how great Dr. Brucato is. He's extremely sensitive and very caring. He wrote my sweet Karen an email this morning, telling her Happy Mother's Day, and that was, very unexpected, but very grateful that you would even do that, Gary. And she lit up like everybody else that knows you. So,
well, that really means a lot, and I'm so happy that we've been working together on the Witness Box. I think people will find that there's a level of discourse on the program that's, I think, a little higher than where a lot of true crime podcasts go. It's really about the kind of intersection of true crime, philosophy, psychology, what's going on in the world, and even faith. And I think people have, rather than finding that kind of boring and pedantic or something, they eat it up. They love it. And the feedback I get is that that's what people have been yearning for. That is this meaning making about these offenses, instead of just talking about them in a way that seems to almost glorify the killers. So I think they also like the heavy emphasis on victims. And we're always looking for good ideas about episodes. If people have something they'd like to suggest, or if there's anyone out there that's been very personally touched by some infamous violent crime and you have a story to tell, Chris, I think we'd always love hearing from people.
absolutely.
And also, Chris and I work together for the Cold Case Foundation, and that's another great joy, is that we get to work with that group of brilliant people. I will also tell everybody that coming very soon on Hulu, I'll be on a series about the life of Dr. Burgess, who's been a guest a few times on the program. She's in the foundation with us. I do my research with her. It is the story of her life, and her incredible contributions to the world of criminology. And I went and did some long interview process, and I've been told that I'm on all the episodes, even if it's just a little. I'm on them. And we'll be together at the Tribeca Film Festival for the debut coming up, and so it's very exciting.
That's a huge deal with Robert De Niro runs that situation.
True, yeah, so I think it'll be really exciting, and but I think everyone will enjoy that. I think it is about time that Dr. Burgess gets sung for her incredible contributions, much of which we discussed on the podcast, on
Yep.
the the witness box, when we were discussing changes in culture and how they've affected crime, and how she came in right at that time that the FBI was trying to understand those cultural changes. So there's some exciting things coming down the pike.
Yeah, and it's available on all the podcast platforms, not only Apple, Amazon. It's even you can get it on YouTube. You could see it's just the audio on YouTube. I think if you went over to the lab to Josh's page, I think he's got them up there where you can listen to them over there. But also leave a review. When you leave a review, then the algorithm hits in and it takes it to different places. So we're hoping to, set the bar a little bit higher in the true crime community with some intellectual thought, amazing guests, and just some great friendship and conversations. And we need you as part of the conversation. So
Yes.
This will be fun.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So tonight, boy, have we got we've put together a couple of things here for you tonight. So this is I'm going to call this part 2 to the video I did the other day, Suzanne. What we know about the DNA evidence. So this is going to be the second half of that. And what I wanted Dr. Brucato to do here for us. This is the first time that he's ever really weighed in on the psychological aspect of the Suzanne Morphew case. And what I mean by that is I'm going to take him back to the area where this happened, meaning where Barry, the husband, grew up, where Suzanne grew up. And I did this video about 3 years ago. So I'm going to play parts of the video. And I give a behavioral analysis assessment just from an investigative position. But of course, I want Dr. Brucato to tell us about why somebody can shoot 65 squirrels or chipmunks or whatever they are in a single time, skin them, and then pretty much brag about them. So also, we're going to go over some more of the affidavit, and that's going to be one of the first things I want to touch on here, where we left off. And Dr. Gary and I talked before this show, as well as just during the week. We talk all the time. But with this BAM on page 122 of the affidavit, I want to tap into what the investigators did. And what they did is they went to, let me pull this up so everybody can read it too a little bit better. There you go. So the special agent, FBI agent, S.A. Grusing, interviewed a field veterinarian from the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, CPW. And she had, she's retired, but she was probably retained just because she had a tremendous amount of information about BAM, and who advised she developed and tested the solution for BAM. So basically, this veterinarian that they interviewed she developed BAM and tested it. And obviously, at some point, probably had her hands into how this became very popular for veterinarians across the country to utilize it. Okay, Gary needs to shut his camera off just for a second. Sorry about that. He just sent me a text. Anyway, so this doctor here is one who, basically was involved in, it sounds like, the early testing and development of this particular product that was found in Suzanne's body. And so she says here, the combination that is used to immobilize a broad range of species of animals. Wolf practiced as a licensed veterinarian for 35 years and taught courses on the effects of sedation on wildlife. So this is like the expert of the experts. She was able to get in there and give an opinion about what they know about the effects of BAM. But here's interesting. And by the way, this is on page 122 of the affidavit. Wolf said BAM has not been tested on humans to her knowledge. But she predicts a tranquilizer dart would cause considerable hematoma to human skin because it's developed to pierce through the deer hide. Now, what a subdural hematoma, that means it's just underneath the skin, and it's kind of a layer of membrane between, like, on the brain for a moment. If I say a subdural hematoma, that means there's going to be like a bleeding just underneath the skin, just to the cranium in of itself. It didn't necessarily penetrate into the brain. But if somebody is shooting this stuff into a human being and it hits a muscle or it hits skin, then it's going to, because it pierces, there's a high probability it's going to get into the bloodstream pretty quickly. And remember, we talked, a couple of weeks ago, everybody in the chat, if you recall, about this medical port that Suzanne had on her because she had cancer, and that port was still active on her body. So our theory was, as you guys recalled, could that have been utilized as a place for injection after she'd been immobilized? Because here's an interesting thing that we learned. Wolf estimates that a female of Suzanne's size would have likely be fully sedated from a dose of BAM in 8 to 12 minutes, and in complete sedation from 2 to 8 hours, depending upon how her body reacted to tranquilizer and her resting position. Now, why is this important? Right, Doc? We have the chipmunk idea of, her husband saying that, his phone pinging all over the house is because he's chasing chipmunks around and, he's shooting them while he's outside and then cuts through the breezeway, etc. Well, the state's theory is that she is running away from him and then ultimately ends up in one of the bedrooms. So if we think about this doctor's expert opinion is she could have been up and moving potentially 8 to 12 minutes, which in theory, she could have been hit by that dart and running around the house. And that cell phone activation is actually very, very important. So, Doc Gary, tell us about the mentality of hunters and why this is important to understand tonight. Go ahead.
Before we even get into that, there is an important point to make, which is that, being somebody that has studied way too many cases, as have you, Chris, we start after enough time to categorize crimes according to features that they have in common, and we kind of start to learn about one case from others that are like it, right? I'm sure that's the way you operate also. And what's a little tricky is when it comes to offenders that use medicines or drugs to knock people out, there are two very different motives that can be present. In one case, it can be an indication that the person is not really interested in torturing or exerting a great deal of pain onto the individual. They simply want to get them somewhere and kill them or whatever, but they don't want to torture them. We saw that, for example, in the infamous case of Armin Meiwes, the man who found someone on the internet that he wanted to eat, who willingly was going to be eaten. They had a cannibalism contract. And before any killing or ingestion took place, the victim was drugged with a medicine that would sedate him and take away pain. And that was because he wasn't interested in torturing him. It was just a very pragmatic thing that he just wanted to put this, sort of the same reason a hunter might use something like this to sedate an animal
that he's going to then butcher or do whatever he's going to do. Then there's another type of person that uses the sedation for the purpose of having complete and total control over the individual to be able to take her, it's usually a her, unfortunately, to take her or a child to some place, right? We see this with date assaults sometimes, or with certain types of serial killers, that they'll slip a Mickey to somebody, or they'll, knock them out or inject them with something. And the reason is to be able to torture them or do whatever they're going to do sexually to the person. And so we don't know if whoever did this was trying to assert complete and total dominance and control in a very cruel, awful way, or if the idea was, I want to get rid of this person, but they are someone I care about at a certain level, and I don't want them to have pain. So I'm going to sedate them and then kill them. It's impossible to tell. Now, regarding the hunting thing, I have seen that usually in people that are serial offenders, and it's a very, very particular type of fantasy, because we have to remember that, well, thank you, Low 12. You have to remember that serial killing is ultimately about the expression of domination and control and manipulation, and it doesn't have to be overtly sexual. It's one of the many contributions of Ann Burgess, is to teach us all that there are many ways of asserting sexual feelings that don't have to be overtly sexual. For example, both Ann and I would argue, as I'm sure you would, Chris, that there was little of that in the Kohberger case. If Kohberger is guilty, there was perhaps a less overt expression of sexual frustration in that stabbing, right? Or that manipulation or observation of victims and things like that. But with some people, it's more overt. So for some people, like Robert Hansen, the man in Alaska who would prostitutes, right? Chase them around. The behavioral science unit under John Douglas was very instrumental in catching him. Dear friends of ours were people directly involved in that case. So there was a little of that. I think there may have been a little of that going on in the Gilgo case. And I think now that you've got the cops digging up the forest that out there in Long Island, I think they may have taken seriously the point that we actually made on this very program with John Ray about that there does seem to be the possibility that he may have been hunting women if he's guilty. So what kind of person would do that? Well, first of all, on a Freudian level, going after a person with a gun and shooting at them and so forth is clearly, a kind of murderous expression of sexual frustration. And there's also that feeling of kind of dominating, controlling a person who thinks they're going to slip away from you and you're smarter than them. So a big part of it is the idea that I am going to make you think you've got a chance. You think you're going to get away from me, and I'm going to come after you, and ultimately I'm going to get you and dominate you, and I'm going to feel like a man for doing it, right? And we often find that in a lot of these killers that do this, from the time they were children, hunting and hurting animals in that way was a way of restoring their sense of manhood or their sense of power. And then they ultimately do it to a human being. And there are a lot of cases where the hunting of animals is a precursor to chasing women around and doing things like that. And we could talk about some of them. But I think that you want to think of it as that in some of these people, not all hunters, but in some of these people, it's a kind of compensation for feelings of smallness and wanting to kind of feel omnipresent and that you're going to ultimately catch this person. Now, as a simple example, in the case of Rex Heuermann, where there is now some thought of the possibility of hunting, and whoever did those cases, Heuermann was an avid gun collector. He was very fond of telling women that he had lots of guns. It made him feel very powerful to scare them. And, the whole idea is when he was a boy, from the time he was a boy, he liked to hunt. It made him feel that he impressed people. But you also had this idea that he was an invisible guy, as big and kind of gargoyle-esque as he is. He was sort of invisible. He was a non-entity. People didn't care about. And with this kind of person, the idea is to take the invisibility and turn it into a superpower. So, like, you think I'm invisible? Well, now you can't see me lurking in the shadows to jump out at any time and kill you. And so you could imagine whoever did this to Morphew, it was very abrupt. The idea was like she's just doing her thing, and then boom, like somebody kind of comes at her and does whatever he's going to do. Because it would have to have been that same sensation of gotcha. You know, you think you were going to slip away from me, and now you're mine, right? So if that's true, what kind of person would need to do that? Well, there's two types. One would be a person who had a fantasy that involved doing that to many people, where there would be one victim who was in a series of women that had to be hunted or sedated or killed in that manner. But if it's an isolated incident, you start thinking, must have been somebody who knew this woman and had a kind of jealousy in a sense that she was slipping away and that she needed to be controlled and humiliated and put in her place because she was essentially a trophy, the same way an animal would be a trophy. And so you start thinking, maybe one way we have to think about this, since there haven't been a spate of similar crimes in the area, is perhaps somebody knew her and she was giving the impression that she was going to slip away, and this person regressed into some old way of handling insecurity, which is to get a weapon and hunt after that thing and sedate it and own it and then do whatever you're going to do with it. And if it's the latter, who would be a suspect other than somebody that was in a romantic relationship who was beginning to feel that she was pulling away or was interested in somebody else and made him feel, the killer, feel small and crumb-like. Now, if that's all true, the most obvious person for authorities to look at would, of course, have been the husband. Now, Chris, give me a little bit of detail on the relationship between them and if there's any truth to the notion that she would have been something of a trophy, that he was afraid he was going to lose her, that he was somebody who might have asserted domination in this way. Tell me how accurate any of that might be regarding the possibility of him as a suspect, because you know this case far better than I do. I have discussed it a little bit, but I'd like to know the nitty gritty of this.
Well, you're spot on because she was the relationship was drifting. He was seeing somebody and she was seeing somebody. She rekindled an old flame from years past, and they had struck up somewhat of a physical relationship. I mean, she had left a couple of different times to go visit with him, but that was on the heels of her during her cancer treatments and stuff, because she felt abandoned by the physical intimacy of their Barry and her relationship. That he was out, his love, his first love, quite frankly, was hunting. Okay, and all of that. I mean, and he even says it in the last episode that I did, Gary, where in the affidavit he tells the cops, well, if I don't have her, at least can I get my guns back, because I love my hunting and I can have my hunting. In fact, he's
pathetic almost, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And then he relates to the investigators that, well, I'm actually going to take a trip as well. Well, meanwhile, his wife is, MIA, 4 years ago to this day, by the way. It was Mother's Day, right? And that, when they first met, and it's a perfect segue to take you into the area where they grew up in Indiana, and this is just some clips from a video that I did, and if anybody wants to watch the full video, you can, and it's titled "What We Learned About Barry and Suzanne and the relationship," and it's a picture of both of them on there. But so I actually went to his house, his area where he grew up, and I think you'll get a little more insight into his personality as well as hers, because I went to her house as well and showed the dichotomy between the two areas, and I think it will answer your question a little bit more. So I'll just do a start-stop. Tell me, where you're at in your mind, and then I will stop it. So here we go for a second. At Barry Morphew's house, where he grew up. At this house, as you can see, where the trailer is, okay, is the boyhood home of Barry. Next to that, the other White House, that is where Trevor Noel's house was, or Barry's sister. And this is the area that he grew up in. And not far from here is where he went to school. But what's important about this particular area is all of these woods here go back for miles. And this is Barry's hunting ground. This entire area he knew just unbelievably well. And that helps us understand a little bit about how he thinks. In order to understand the hunter, you have to understand where he hunts. This house is very significant. So there's a couple things going on here also. So all of this area here is like farm area, right? In terms of, corn and beans, okay, off-season corn and the, regular season. But these woods is where he started shooting squirrels, chipmunks, raccoons, etc. And his dad, the school is not far from his house, and I'm gonna take you over there next. But this area is all he started hunting at 7 years old. 7 years old. And this was one of the first times where obviously he got into starting to collect antlers from deer as well. So what's the mentality going on here in terms of just from the age of 7 and you're shooting, little critters and most hunters, by the way, right, Gary? I mean, back me up on this. Most hunters hunt for food. They don't hunt just to kill. I'm curious as to what your opinion could be without knowing him. Obviously, you haven't talked to him or analyzed him or anything, but just in your experience, the fact that he was always, he either had a baseball glove or he had a rifle in his hand, one of the two.
Right. So probably from the time, I mean, look, I never analyzed them. I never met him. And these are just speculations based on available information. But it sounds like this is somebody who was highly competitive, not very accustomed to losing, and was a person who, from the time he was a little boy, had a kind of morality and a sense of himself that was built upon the notion that whoever it is that has the most might is the winner. That one way to win is just to have an advantage over some smaller thing that ultimately is at your mercy. And my guess is that, eventually when he got older, that got sort of blended in with sexual excitement, but that when he was a kid, it was something that was a source of pride. Probably dad or somebody would sort of say to him, like, good job, son, because it becomes so paired with a person's ego that eventually you develop a kind of narcissism and a need to control everything around you because you just can't handle the idea of loss or anybody daring to leave. I mean, ultimately, the psychology of it is that a hunter is a person who, not all hunters, but this type of person, the type of a person who wants to arbitrate who leaves and who stays, who lives and who dies, because ultimately the center of it is a sensitivity to loss. So that as a means of control, you essentially play God and you assert control over who lives and dies. And my guess is, if I'm right about that, the key, the match to the straw for this kind of person would be somebody that he thought was going to leave him, and that was going to leave him feeling narcissistically injured, that this time he had lost the game. And that kind of person would never be able to handle. It's the kind of person who, if they were losing in their sports career, would have such a hard time accepting it that they would eventually even cheat, because the idea of looking like a winner is more important than being a winner. It's a very classic trait of narcissistic types of people, because just looking like you're right is all that really matters, right? So, so if that's true, you start smelling that this is somebody who didn't feel that he came from a highfalutin kind of background, and getting together with this beautiful, woman and the whole thing. She must have represented in his mind a kind of a trophy. And the idea that somebody else could possibly wind up with her would feel to him like, caveman times, like troglodyte times, like somebody came and tried to steal away a possession and you were going to take it back at any cost. If I can't have her, no one could have her. This is just speculation, but I suspect that it jives with the reasons that law enforcement were originally looking at this person. I mean, it sounds like people agree who are intimate with the case. What do you think, Chris? I mean, doesn't that sound sort of like what might have happened?
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I thought it was important for you to see, where he started. And there's one area here, and I go to the ball field in the school next. And
because this house is also where Barry would be under all that pressure from his father.
He had a very, everybody described his father, including Barry's best friend. I hung around with Barry's best friend for 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
They were childhood friends. I mean, they went to school together. Weddings, all the stuff from the time they were little boys. And he said that Barry's dad would have him in that backyard of that house over there.
Yeah.
And just make him for hours and hours, and not ask him. He would make him for hours and hours and hours to play baseball because it was his father's dream, according to his friend.
How interesting.
That Barry would become a professional baseball player. But let me take you to the field where all of that stuff
where he would be told, get to the ball field. He would walk up this road to school, which is right at the end of the block here. And it was this house where all of that pressure would come. So I want to take you into the early development years of Barry. Behind me is Cunningham Elementary School. This is a school where Barry went from kindergarten to 6th grade. It's closed now, but as you can tell, this area right here was critical to his early developmental phase. He went into professional baseball, at least he tried to get there. He got dropped out of the minors. He just wasn't good enough at that point. But this baseball diamond that you're looking at out here is where those first years started. Barry would come day after day.
And as you can see, his house is right there. And this baseball field is right here at the end, just at the end of the block. And what's interesting about it, you can tell it's obviously disheveled and closed and run down. But this is Barry's environment. And when, to your point earlier, the trophy concept, when you see Suzanne's environment, I think you're going to have even further of an aha moment. But
right.
So let me just play this real fast for you.
Being told by his dad, practice, 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 who, by the way, has been described as being extremely forceful. But Barry could walk on water, and his two sisters couldn't. But his dad would make him practice every single day, almost relentlessly. He even built a batting cage in the back of his house. In order to understand his intensity, you first have to understand this baseball field. Let's go take a look.
So tell us why that's so important to do a victimology in relationship to just all the players involved from a psychological aspect. For an investigator, why is that so important from a psychological aspect to understand who they're looking for?
Well, first of all, when we look at the victim,
the very, very, very first thing you're doing, at least in my mind, when you're looking at a case, is there are these two very wide buckets. One being, is this someone outside of the house? And one being, is this someone inside of the house, right? In the intimate circle. And one of the first ways that you start to understand that is you look at the relationships between the individuals involved, if anybody might have had a motive or a gripe or anything like that. And then you have to think about the access to the individual, who would have known this person's habits, who would have known where they, when they would be vulnerable, etc. But you also need to understand a little bit about if this is a high profile target or a person that nobody would have noticed was gone. If this is a person who looks an awful lot and was killed in a way that was an awful lot like other people nearby. So there's potential linkage to other people. You have to put all of these pieces of information together. And, there are a lot of things that immediately are problematic. Like, for example, when a stranger targets a person, what are the reasons why a stranger might do that? Well, one reason is that there's some pragmatic reason, like robbing them. And we see no indication of that here, right? No signs of someone breaking into the house or trying to rob this person. The second huge reason why somebody would do it would be for an SA kind of reason, right? And those people tend to be serial offenders, whether, especially if you're going to kill the person, you don't just do that one time. You'd see a spate of those offenses, and you'd probably see that the victims were similar in terms of victimology, potentially what they looked like, how easy access to them, location, what they did for a living, etc. And in this case, all of the classic things that are suggestive of an outside party are not really there. You start immediately thinking this seems more like something an intimate would do. The problem is that there are things that were done here that are a little much for a domestic situation. So then you start thinking, is it possible that somebody was trying to make it look like it was something other than a domestic situation? And I will tell you that in my work on elimination murder, and where you try to get a person out of the way who's an impediment to something you want, like money,
which you coined,
it's a
by
term
the way.
I coined.
Yeah.
And I have certainly had to, and in my studies of mass murder, which very much often have to do with family annihilation, I have learned a very great deal about domestic killings. And I have found that construct of staging, where you try to make it look like something else happened, is actually very classic in domestic offenses. You don't see it as much in those outside kind of offenses. It's often a giveaway that somebody is afraid that it's too obvious that an insider did something, so they alter things. They do things that they've researched and learned. Now, what's interesting is this, when you're thinking about the psychology of this. If you were the kind of person who was going to stage and take the time to do that, wouldn't you also be the kind of person who, even in the plotting of the killing, wouldn't do something that would draw immediate attention to yourself, like using a chemical that you're intimately familiar with for the killing of animals? That's more something you would do impulsively, because that's what happens to be in the house. But then later you could stage it and hide it and whatever, because you come to your senses. So I wonder if the idea isn't something like an explosion of jealous rage, thinking for a day or so, or a couple of days of what you're going to do, grabbing whatever the heck it is, and that's around the house, doing what you're going to do, regressing into this hunting stage that made you feel powerful when you were a kid, asserting dominance, and then kind of going, what the heck am I going to do now? And then you start to see the clear-headed staging that looks more manipulative and so forth. That is an interesting hypothesis, in my opinion. And it would also be consistent with the kind of person who wasn't looking to torture somebody meticulously, but who just sort of did what they did because they were furious and feeling narcissistically injured. Now, I don't know, Chris, how that all sounds to you, but the one thing that certainly jumps out at me is that if, let's say, her husband had something to do with this, I would postulate a person who felt smaller psychologically than what he had achieved in his life, who felt like something of an imposter, who always felt that he wasn't quite good enough, and then was on a kind of pedestal, and then felt that something was about to boot him off of it,
and he was going to, have like an Icarus moment where he was going to fall to earth, or I suppose you could say Lucifer. He was going to fall to earth, and the truth was going to, and if that's true, that's exactly the kind of person who would say, no, 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 no. I'm not only am I not getting knocked off the pedestal, but somebody else is not getting on it.
Well,
And
it's
so yeah. Now, does any of that jive with your own sense of things?
no, yeah, that's a fascinating assessment to hear you say stuff like that, because in this environment,
Yeah.
throughout the whole community, Barry was like this, wow, what a baseball player, what this. But in his home environment, he's getting all of this pressure from his dad to say, you're
Right.
not good enough. Get back out there, try again, try again.
Right.
And I've often wondered, and I'm curious as to what your opinion or thought process is. Did the gun give him a vent to explode, that anger
Probably.
out from him? I mean, is that a possibility, or am I in left field on that?
It's certainly a possibility, but what's very interesting is that the signs are there that this is not a person who was saying, like, for example, I don't know how many of the audience remember, oh Lord, what was her name? I got Dorothy Stratton, the very pretty Playboy model and actress. She was in the movie Galaxina, who was married to Paul Snider, who was the founder of Chippendales, by the way, the strip club. He made her famous and felt that he had to control her. And when she became romantically involved with the director Peter Bogdanovich, he wasn't satisfied just to kill her. He had to kind of torture her a little bit. He put her into a bondage device and needed to destroy her face with a shotgun and assault her and everything else. In other words, that's a different kind of it. That's what a narcissistic person could do when it isn't enough just to kind of say, if I can't have you, no one will. Like, you're not going to shoot that deer before I do, right, in the hunting game. It's more like I have to exact revenge. There's a different kind of a guy where it's simply about the ego blow. I don't want anybody to have what I want. And I think that's a little more what because I think the use of that particular medicine, if he was guilty, is much more about like, I don't necessarily want you to suffer. I just don't want you alive. Right. Now, there's another possibility, of course, which is that he might not have thought, if he's guilty, he might not have thought that the medicine was going to kill her. He might have thought it was simply going to sedate her and allow him to do whatever the heck he was going to do. And then it was enough that it killed her. Because how would a person know, unless they had researched it heavily, what the effects on a human being would be of this drug? I mean, I know he knew what it would do to animals. But don't you think, Chris, it's a very important point that it would just be too obvious and conspicuous to kill someone with a chemical agent that you are uniquely familiar with? I mean, unless it was impulsive and stupid and that's just what was in the house.
Well, I don't think he knew. I don't think he thought through
Right.
that she would be
impulsive.
found. Yeah.
Yeah, it was impulsive. But then he got method. Whoever did this started out stupid and then got, in other words, it starts out kind of disorganized almost.
Almost, but I think he was very methodical.
Methodical, but a little loss of control.
Yeah.
A little loss of control. Right. And then he gets cleaner later on. And then the typical of a narcissistic person, the cover story is stupid. It's like the Kohlberger thing. The cover story is dumb. Oh, no one would believe that story. It's ridiculous. I mean, so, tell a little bit about how the bike was found and the how her body was found and the animal bones and it's a goofy attempt.
Yeah, and I did that in part one, and the bike obviously looked like it was staged right from the get-go.
Yeah,
and the animal bones on top. But I want to get through this video here. Let's go to the ball field and then let's go from there. So this is where he grew up, and this is that environment.
If you look around you, also, you can tell over here, this is part of the area where he would also hunt as a young boy. I can still sense the children playing here. And I can also sense Barry taking this very walk as a young boy, not knowing that his baseball career potentially would not be his future. This is left field of that now lost dream. The two dugouts, the snack bar. Can't you picture it as a kid? I think we all played on one of these types of fields. But what's interesting is there's a tree almost where the pitcher's mound would have been. So how many times did Barry's father sit on these bleachers and watch his son play baseball? You just wonder.
I'm having such an odd thought, Chris.
Go.
Well, it's funny. I think sometimes about Freud and some of the idea. I can't help but think it's very interesting that Suzanne they reported her missing on Mother's Day in 2020, right? Literally, we're on the anniversary, 4th anniversary. And it's just so interesting that the psychology of this, if the husband is involved, was really more about the father than it had anything to do with his mother. And you almost think of it of a person that is so in denial that this is about manhood, masculinity, virility, your dad, that doing it on Mother's Day is almost like fooling yourself that it's about women.
Interesting thought.
That's nothing to do with women. It has to do with being caught up in your issue with your father. And I just find that kind of fascinating that she goes missing, reported missing on Mother's Day, when would have made a lot more sense on Father's Day.
That is a fascinating point. Nobody has said that, because you're right. Why does he pick,
Right.
if he's involved, right? Right. Why does he pick Mother's Day?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, everybody says, well, his daughters are out of town. Okay, well, we get that piece, but there's a whole backstory to why this thing is starting to unfold that particular day. So I can't wait to go a little bit deeper here with you. Just if that brought that thought to the surface, I want you've got to see another piece.
Well, you don't know what that day symbolized. It might have been,
Right.
for example, that he thought she was a mother that was going to abandon her kids, and the whole idea of her being celebrated on Mother's Day might have horrified him, or he might have felt, if my mom was around more, I wouldn't have been stuck with this crappy, aggressive dad. In his opinion, however, it seems like he might have painted him. It's interesting to think about the symbolism of it, but I have always found the day when there's a holiday or a symbolic day, it's just a giveaway of what's going on. When a serial killer kills someone on a holiday, you think the holiday must have been especially lonely, right? Like I went out at Christmas time and took a victim. It's a giveaway of loneliness, but this is interesting. Mother's Day? Interesting. Anyway, let's dog ear that.
So one of the things I want to point out here is if you take a look up here, up the street, this is the area where Barry grew up. This is his hunting ground. Barry shot a lot of animals in those woods back there growing up as a teenager. Now, it's important to understand the behavioral aspect, in order to understand the hunter, you have to recognize where he has hunted. Okay? Well, this is it. He used to shoot raccoons as a kid. He would skin them and then sell them for about $30 a piece. Okay? This is really a fascinating part of Barry's personality and understanding what makes him tick. Take a look. This is his area.
So in your research, Gary, when you, Brucato, when you've gone back and you've looked at, environments where
Right.
how much does that play into, obviously, their development?
Well, it's interesting because first of all, the whole thing reminds me of like when psychologists ask someone to draw a house person and tree, this kind of famous psychological test. And, if someone were to draw this, you would immediately start thinking, wow, that's just so isolated, and there's a kind of a nature quality where you'd imagine somebody being more comfortable, maybe even with animals than neighbors, or being around, trees and sky more than an urban setting, that kind of thing. And the home, when that image you showed of the boyhood home earlier, it has a kind of unloved feeling to me, like a Bates Motel or something. When I saw it, it didn't exactly make me want to walk up to it and knock on the door and, go inside and have a cup of coffee. It kind of gives you the shivers a little bit. It's an unwelcoming, isolated little world. And you get the sense of a person who's not going to have the best people skills. So a little bit lonely, and who developed a sense of himself as relating to the world through competition and wanting to be better than this. Right. Another example of a person like that, of course, was Bundy, and in Ted Bundy's situation, another extreme narcissist with issues toward women who were trophies in his mind. For Bundy, he felt, he had been told that the woman that he thought was his sister was his mother, unexpectedly. And he always had this idea that he was going to go out and meet some very beautiful trophy girlfriend, and she was going to pull him out of that. And then he found a woman that he was crazy about. He went with her all the way out to Washington State University and everything. And then she dumps him, and he starts killing. And this is because he had been thrown off the pedestal and been reminded you're nothing but a trespasser in this territory. You go back to where you came from. And so it was his way of saying, I'll show you. I'll show you. And I think that's very important to bear in mind in a miniature way here. I'm not saying whoever did this is a serial killer. I'm saying that it's
Right.
that same emasculation and that same thing. And, Bundy is somebody who, look, he wanted so desperately to be with the haves instead of the have-nots that, like, just as a simple example, and I've told this story elsewhere, but I love it. It's such a fascinating story to me. I learned from a witness, a survivor, a person who knew him, that Bundy got a little gig at a country club once, and he was a servant, and he would go into the closet, put on the tux to serve people, and he got the idea that since he was wearing the tux, maybe he could pass for one of the people visiting the country club. So then people would say, excuse me, could I have a drink? He said, I don't work here. I don't work here. That's one of the servants. And he would mill around and try to hit on people and be attractive and the whole thing. And it was a total fantasy, but he always knew he was like kind of an imposter. And the other thing about Bundy that I think is going to play into this a little bit, into the psychology, I hope you don't mind my musing
No,
out
keep
loud
going.
about this, is that you have to remember that, as I've said elsewhere, part of Bundy's MO was, as everyone here will probably know, would be to pretend that he was hurt and then to ask a woman for help. And if she would help him, he would hurt her, sedate her, or bop her on the head, make her, and then take her off somewhere and do what he was going to do to her. And I have always thought in my analysis of that case that the idea was that he had once trusted women. He had once trusted his mother. He once trusted Liz, etc. And he thought they were kind, and it turned out they weren't. They lied. They left him, whatever. So it was his way of saying, you're trusting me that I'm kind, and now you're the fool that believes there are kind people in the world. You know, you're the fool that trusts me, and now you're going to get hurt, right? You think that it's okay to be kind to me and trust me. You're an idiot. And there's a little of that going on here too, I think. Whoever did this, I get the sense of a person who not only did they feel that they had obtained a trophy, but that they believed that someone could care about them as more than a baseball star or whatever. And then they weren't good enough for even her.
Interesting.
Right. It's that double whammy of I'm a fool because I trusted you. So now to compensate, I'm going to get you by surprise. You're going to be the fool. You know, you're walking around thinking you're safe. Boom. And so that I think it's that way of asserting aggression that went all the way back to being and then secondly, that leveling of the playing field because I trusted you. And, you know, because I think you're dealing with a control freak, a narcissistic control freak, whoever did this. Now,
And if we come out to this road here, you can see the house down there where he surrounded the house, as you saw, with trees. He surrounded that house with trees.
Now that was kind of a windbreak, you know, obviously for Indiana.
yeah.
But let me take you to the high school here real fast. Oops, here we go.
That house with trees, kind of a barrier. That says a lot. That says a lot about his personality. Just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, because of there's a screen of trees. It's almost like a kind of a seclusion. Yeah.
And here's his high school. Now he goes into high school with this baseball, you know, everybody, oh, it's him, and you know, Suzanne is there, but she's not really interested in him at all. You know, she's kind of in her own, you know, space, and she doesn't live far from the high school. He has to, you know, get bussed up into the high school or walk or drive. You know, by that time he was driving. But I found the high school was really interesting because his name is all over the high school. It's interesting.
Must have meant a lot.
Yes, and he was somebody.
That's it.
He's somebody.
Exactly. And he was about to be a nobody.
Yeah, so this is even on all the way out there in center field, they have the records of who did what. And then when you first come up to the school, you're going to see here in a second, you land right on Barry Morphew.
Sad. Don't you think?
Yeah, there you go.
So I'm standing here where it all happened for Barry at a younger age. 1986, Alexandria Tigers. His father pushed him so hard that this ball field became a place of refuge for Barry. Think about it. This is the dugout, the home dugout, where Barry grew up. His mind, his intensity, his abilities were all honed right here on this ball field. And in fact, it led him to the minor leagues for the Blue Jays. And that must have been an amazing, amazing experience for him. But it all started at that school where we were just at, and then here at this high school, Alexandria High School, the Tigers. It's interesting that tigers and cats seem to be a theme in Barry's thought process.
So when they found the bike, the first thing he interjected into the conversation was, "Is it a lion?" And I always thought, you know, he came from the Tigers as a baseball team, and I just couldn't help myself but to think, gosh, I wonder if he's interjecting, you know, the lion / tiger into the conversation, because that's the only thing he could think of so quickly. You know, I don't know. I know that was from left field, but at the same time, you know, as an investigator, I'm always trying to think outside of the box, trying to.
Well, lies and cover stories are very revealing, like another psychological test, the thematic apperception test. You project your own psychology into the fib, into the story you make up. I mean, I'll give you an example. There was a case that I once sort of gave some thoughts on that was in the media. You know, I'll be a little loose on it, but it was something like this man had a wife that was kind of aggressive to him all the time and emasculated him, and she winds up killed, and he claims that she was killed by a runaway horse that she was riding on. And when I gave some thoughts about the case, I said, isn't it interesting, if it is a made-up story, if it's staged, think of the symbolism of the story. The horse, if you imagine it to be him, is subjugated by her, used, ridden, and then its animal nature takes over and it kills her because it doesn't want to be ridden by her anymore. Well, that's probably exactly what happened, except he was the one who did it, not the horse. Well, it's a little bit like that. It's like it's almost like what a person would be saying is, did some bestial animal possessive creature kill her? You know, it's a funny thing about lions. Lions have a very unique characteristic that I have found to exist in virtually no other animal, which is that if a lion smells the scent of another male lion on the female, it will kill the female and all their cubs, because it cannot tolerate the idea that she has mingled with with another. And so lions are very interesting for that reason, as a symbol. Although I don't know if he knew that fact.
I did not.
They are an animal that engages in a family annihilation when there's been infidelity, which is quite interesting. Very, very interesting.
And you know, and to dovetail into that, it's interesting that he chose that particular animal that night, almost instantaneously when he pulled up. The first question he asked, and you should see him on the video, he goes, "A lion? Was it a lion?"
Yeah.
And
was it the king of the forest? Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Remember,
I think how he would have seen himself, right?
The behavioral analysis of people, of suspects or subjects, they go back to what they know.
Right.
Yeah, I find it interesting that he interjects a lion or tiger into the conversation about Suzanne's disappearance. Maybe it's a familiarity that he had. If you take a look at the center field out there, the scoreboard says Tiger Field. Well, that's what he was looking at all the time. You know, it's interesting as I look at this Tigers ball cap that all the kids would wear. Maybe Barry wore one just like this. But what's interesting is what's engraved on the inside. It says "The Game." Sometimes behavior becomes a game. Again, is that what we may be seeing here? I'm not sure yet. Let's keep going.
So now we're gonna leave his stomping ground. We're gonna head to Suzanne. Now, the interesting thing about this is it's a total paradigm shift.
Yeah, I would expect it to be like the other side of the tracks.
So let's take a walk.
Yeah.
You'll see the theme here are tigers. Everything's about tigers. What's so significant about this ball field, though, this one, this is the one place Barry could not excel. And the reason for that is his father wouldn't let him. And that's the football field. Barry was denied an opportunity to become a star here. But he could become a star in the baseball field. But his father would not let him. He held him back for fear that he would get injured and would interfere with his baseball career. Isn't that fascinating that ultimately, though, Barry gets injured and it ruins his professional opportunities?
So what do you think about that? His dad and I, all of this, by the way, comes firsthand from Barry's, very intimate circle, where, like I told you, I drove around for 4 days with this guy.
What was the injury?
I think he hurt his knee or his leg. But here he wanted to play football. He went to his dad and he begged his dad, let me play football. And his dad said, no, you're gonna be a baseball player. You're not going to be a football player. You're going to be a baseball player. But the way it was projected to me, or told to me, that was, he wanted to do that really bad, and he felt rejected, by his father, that he couldn't, meet that expectation that he could do both.
Well, it's very sad because it suggests that from the time that he was a boy, his understanding of relationships is that they were essentially transactional, and that a person didn't really care about what you wanted to be or whatever. It was really just about, I have a narcissistic need for you to be a certain thing, and your choices cannot make it less probable that you will do what I need you to do, so that the choices of the other person are not important. I mean, for example, imagine, if he were to say, Dad, I want to go away. I don't want to be with you anymore. I want to run away. The father would have probably reacted very much the way that he reportedly would have felt about his wife wanting to leave him, which is, that's not even allowed. Like, that's not even on the table as an option, because I need you. I don't care what you feel. You're just not allowed to go. That's the end of it. And, it's interesting. I mean, Chris, I think as I'm listening to all this, it's very interesting, because if you've ever, as a man, or the men that are in the audience, if you ever loved a woman and then had the woman reveal to you that she didn't love you anymore, or that she loved somebody else, you don't get the murderous rage part, but you do get the feeling of emasculation and feeling kind of like a crumb for a long time. It's just sort of a thing in our culture, and I think a thing that men feel is they start to equate everything with that. Like, I'm a loser, nobody loves me, etc. And men can feel that way in our culture also when they lose a job, because their identity is so caught up in it. And I think, especially in this story, you can understand how this was probably the closest that this person came to a relationship where somebody might have actually cared about him as more than a transaction. Yeah. And then the idea of the person wanting to leave or liking somebody better makes you say, my father was right. People are only as loyal as their options, and you're only as good as your last day at the game, and if you're a loser, you're a loser. And it's a very tragic thing to think that way, but I can understand a man feeling that way. I mean, I've been there. I mean, every man I know has been there at some point. It's that feeling of rejection. But the part that most people won't progress to is the sour grapes and the idea of having to hurt the person. A normal person would say, well, if the person doesn't want to be with me, they don't love me, there's nothing I can do about it. It just makes me sad, right? But it's the going beyond that that's really disturbing, because that's where your narcissism takes over. And it's that idea of, I have another need here, which is that all those memories that I'm trying to overcome, they're creeping back on me. They're hunting me.
Oh,
I'm
interesting.
outrunning them. You know,
And
I've had clients in my lifetime like that, and some of them have even reported dreams of their past being like an animal that was hunting them in a forest, that was coming after them, that was going to catch up with them, that was going to drag them back to what they really are. And you know, so it's that feeling of being pursued by a past that embarrasses you. You know,
I always love you are always spot on. You blow me away every time, and I've known you for a long time now. I mean, and every time I know this is the first time you've watched this, and yet you're taking this to another level. I mean, obviously I'm on a surface level of understanding, the human mind, and the behavior of it just from my experience of, seeing all these murders and talking to all the murderers. But you've just taken it to a different level. I got to keep going here because I don't want to. There's more.
I get caught up in details. Yeah.
No, I love
it.
The audience love it. We all love it. Don't stop.
You might need a part two.
It's okay. It's okay. We're only an hour and 15. We got over we got 2,100 people here. So we got
more few.
I think it's fascinating that this football field represents a denial.
And
Barry
Morphew. This was a denial to him. It's the first time he failed in his mind. Now here's Suzanne. This is where she grew up. Different school. Tigers. Seems to be a cat theme. So her junior high was next door to the high school. She saw him, but he was a little bit old. But she never thought anything of it. It was through the baseball. He'd be playing baseball, and sometimes the kids would see the games. But this is where she grew up.
So I'm standing in front of Suzanne's childhood home. This is the first area where she would have seen Barry working as a young man who would turn the sprinklers on at the golf course. And up the street there is also the elementary school that we just drove past.
So she grows up in a golf course community. And she walks to school right up the street. Barry is miles out in the country. Okay. And I mean, talk about the other side of the tracks. Let's just kind of put it there. And his personality development is about, a rifle and a baseball glove. She first noticed him because he would ride around on a golf cart because he got a part-time job at the golf course. And he was the maintenance boy, the sprinkler guy. Now in high school, he's the superhero.
Right.
But in reality, he's turning on the sprinklers at a golf course. Okay. That's her first impression of him. Thoughts before I go on?
I mean, need you say anything about that?
Okay. I'm just throwing it out there.
What's interesting as I get these weird little side notes. I'm fascinated by the accidental poetry of things, people's names, the genealogy of their names, things like that. And I remember when I heard about this case, I looked it up and I learned that Morphew comes from Old French, which in turn comes from Latin for malefetus, which means ill-omened, which is very, very interesting to me. It basically means person.
What was it?
It means a person who's cursed or who has bad luck on them. And I just think that's fascinating, given what wound up happening to her, that her name in its origin means ill-omened.
Interesting.
It's fascinating. Things like that have made.
The Fairway Estates. So this is where Suzanne grew up. Went to high school here, elementary school, middle school. This is her home. quite the contrast to where Barry out in the country grew up. There's no real hunting going on here other than golf. I just find it fascinating that these two personalities come together in this love story potentially gone wrong. You'll notice they still have the ribbons up. And there's one in front of her house as well on her tree.
That's her childhood home. And there's ribbons out in front.
That'd be a nice house tree person test.
Yeah.
Welcoming home, pretty trees, road that leads up, a chimney.
It's a neighborhood, and everybody, look there, if you drive up the street, all these yellow ribbons are out there for her. And she's not even living there. She lives in Colorado. But this gives you a sense of, the bond of this middle America, neighborhood with this young lady that's part of them. And it was really sad to drive up that street, to be honest with you, to see, the reaction of the people. I talked to her brother at length, Andy. Her dad and family owned a hot dog stand called Gene's. Now, this is what he writes from a love letter. It read in part, I remember the first kiss. No, she wrote this. I remember the first kiss you gave me at the front door. I remember our long talks in the dark on the golf course between the third tee and the green.
You see the symbolism of a place of athleticism. Instead of being a place where you compete and are aggressive, there's now a place where you make love.
Interesting.
It's elevated into something that he hasn't known before, right? Now he's got to go back to the original. That hurts. Right.
And this is from her.
I understand.
Yeah.
But you see it.
So this is the town. Barry had a car, so he would pick her up and, cruise the area. So he was a big deal. And she started to like that. And the puppy love turns into love.
As teenagers, on Friday and Saturday nights, Barry, who was the high school baseball star, and Suzanne, who was a few years younger than him, along with their friends, would cruise the streets of downtown Alexandria, Indiana. This is small-town America, in the heartland. This city once relied on the automotive industry for its vibrance. When the jobs disappeared, the town's economy collapsed, and today, it's a former shell of what it once was. In this city parking lot, friends remember Barry driving his red Oldsmobile Cutlass with the windows down. He would use a single dumbbell to do arm curls so he could flex his muscles to be noticed by the girls. And he always had a girl with him before he dated Suzanne.
Now, what's interesting about that is he's back there now. He moved in with his mom.
His mother. That's interesting.
Well, here I am in front of Barry's house and Suzanne's home in Indiana. This is the house where they packed everything up, and then from here they moved to Colorado.
Now, the interesting thing about this, Gary, is she didn't want to go. But he packs everything up, and they end up, in Colorado. And I have 2 pictures of what the cars look like. And he had packed up all of these antler, from deers into his Bobcat, which is the skip loader, and on a trailer. And in his front seat of his truck, Suzanne was so embarrassed that, according to the eyewitnesses who took the pictures, she was like, I don't want to ride in that, so I'll just follow you guys. And she ended up following him in another vehicle while he pulled all of this stuff. So he loaded everything up in the front seat.
So they moved from Indiana all the way out to Colorado?
He moved to her. Yes, he moved her and the family from this house right here.
So like if you just took like Interstate 70, I mean, you're talking about over 1,200 miles away from everything that he came from. And his father is still alive?
No, his father was deceased.
His father had died at the time?
His father had died.
And his mother was alive?
Is still alive, and he lives with her today.
Very interesting. So just to understand, he's fleeing, because it feels like a fleeing, doesn't it? Leaving all of that behind, 1,200 miles away, and then sort of goes somewhere else. And what is it that he was attempting to accomplish, in your opinion, by that total change of scenery? Because it's very typical of imposter types that you're afraid that, Oh, Chris? Am I still on? Let me see what's going on.
I
Oh, okay. I thought I got.
No, I accidentally
I thought
hit
that
a button.
came out, to drag me off the screen. This thing, but I was saying that, Chris, in it, people who feel like imposters sometimes try
to
to
the
isolate.
interview room.
Hang on.
I'm grateful that you're here with us.
Hang on, Gary.
I'm in Anderson, Indiana, hometown.
Sorry about that. I hit 2 buttons.
Oh, it's okay, but you get what I'm saying. I don't know how much of that you heard. I'm saying that sometimes this is hilarious. Sometimes people who feel like imposters and are afraid that they're going to be discovered for what they really are need to get you out of. They have to get you out of that place to some new setting in which they feel more in control. Because the whole idea is that if you were to see them in their home setting, there are too many elements there that could pull the curtain away and show you what they really are. So if you're trying to aspire to be something else, you want to kind of go someplace with the trappings of what you think you are and what you want to project to get you, So I'm not surprised getting in the car.
Well, that is a
1,200
really
miles
great
away.
analogy, because he had this landscaping business in Indiana and apparently had burned every bridge possible in his business relationships. And his number one love was hunting, and the area that he moved to and where she was buried, which we discover, right, is where all the elk are. In fact, he even says, remember, part of his alibi is he makes that turn to go look at an elk. So that's a fascinating observation that you just made, because he's projecting that he's this big hunter,
right,
in this new environment, and she's isolated,
exactly,
going through cancer treatments. And by the way, he didn't even show up at her chemotherapies.
Oh.
He would go hunting while she was suffering.
But Chris, this is the whole thing. I don't think that if this person is guilty, I don't think that's because of cruelty or indifference. Right. It's because of an inability to tolerate loss. And what you do when you're afraid of loss, if you're that kind of person, is you regress back into the thing that makes you feel in control of relationships again. So the idea is that instead of tolerating that you're losing this person, you go hunting. That's how some people are. I've had clients like that. I've had people like that I've talked to all throughout my life. They can't handle the idea that the person that they love is going to leave or may die. And they're instead of showing up at the hospital, they're doing some really weird thing that they associate with control. So you say, where were you? Why didn't you come to the hospital when your loved one was dying? Well, the car needed to be worked on. I couldn't leave it like that, and then you find out that's what they've done their whole life in moments of stress. And so I see it that there may be this element of, at the heart of it, this pathetic core of this person was special and made me feel special, and I was going to lose them. And I can't bear that. I deal with that by going into hunter mode. Something else dies,
Interesting.
right? And I'm the arbiter of who lives and dies.
So
Not
he's
having
the
something
decider of
taken.
life or death.
Yeah, instead of something that happened with oh Lord, what was his name? Kenneth Bianchi, the serial killer. Kenneth Bianchi had lost his father at a young age from a pulmonary disease. And then what he would do when dealing with it was he would go out and strangle women where he was arbitrating their breath and who lives and who dies and when they were taken from him, instead of having to feel like a weakling because he lost this father who then left him with a mother he loathed. So, it's very, very interesting to think of it that way, that the essence of this may be fear of loss and needing to have control over relationships in a transactional way because you just can't bear it. The idea of loss and being knocked off a pedestal. That's the psychology of it as I see it. And so I'm not shocked he would do something else.
Okay, let me I got to move the video forward
Barry
here.
and Suzanne Morphew. And that's the football.
Forward here, Got it. I got that.
In this city park,
And
Okay, so
and he always had a girl with him before he dated Suzanne.
and sorry about that, guys. I hit the wrong button over here.
well, here I am in front of Barry's house and Suzanne's home in Indiana. This is the house where they packed everything up, and then from here they moved to Colorado. This is the house the girls grew up in, where Barry had this open land here to hunt, to do whatever he needed to do. He had his own barn. All of these trees, he's planted every one of these trees, all of these pines, and this is really kind of an oasis for Suzanne. I mean, this is where she raised her girls and her family. This is where she would meet her family for, get-togethers. Just everybody would have fun. One of the things that's interesting here is it looks like the systems. He's got beware of dogs, warning, trespassing, you'd be shot. You can see those films there, but there's so much of Suzanne in this home. These rocks speak so much of Barry's landscaping capabilities. This is the home that he sold and cashed out on almost immediately after Suzanne disappeared. This home represents Suzanne and how quickly he got rid of it. And it's almost interesting, it's very interesting as we think about the correlation between the home in Colorado and this home here in Indiana.
So he sells this house like lickety split after she disappears.
Of course.
Yeah. I knew you were going to say that.
It goes with what I'm.
She's still missing.
Yeah, I know. I knew you would.
And this is the place she didn't want to leave. I can imagine all of the great memories she made here in this particular home.
She loved this place.
It's sad. It really is. It's sad.
This is the area that Suzanne knew best. She was born and raised here. She loved her Indiana hometown and all it represented. She raised her 2 girls here. Her friends tell us she did not want to leave and move to Colorado. This is where she beat cancer for the first time. This is where her heart was.
So where I'm at right now is Barry's tree farm. Right along the lines of those pine trees there and along that forest line, and you see some of the stubbings of trees sticking up. So what Barry would do is he would plant the trees, and when they were mature enough, he would pull them up, and then he would use them for his landscaping business and his customers. Okay? Barry is very, very experienced at planting trees extensively. And this was his old tree farm, which is, he has since sold it, but this was his property.
So he had two farms. He had a deer farm and a tree farm. So he would grow these trees, and then he would, harvest them, and then he would plant them onto his landscaping property. Okay. And I'm getting a note here real fast from our mods and stuff. Did we just hit 200,000, guys? Are you
Looks it.
serious? It does?
That's what people are saying. The
Wow.
whole audience is congratulating you.
Thank you guys so much. Oh my goodness. We can't, I don't know what to say. Gary, maybe we can give away one of your autograph signed books of the new evil. We'll figure out a way of
Sure.
doing that. Is that something we could do?
Sure, of course.
Okay, there you go.
You asked for it.
Okay, but I'm going to have to figure out how we're going to do that, because I'm not set up for it. I have never done something like that. But
That's wonderful, Chris, and I'm not surprised.
well, thanks, Gary. I mean, you're a huge part of these numbers that
Aw.
doubt about it. And everybody, you guys are amazing. You're amazing. But I don't want to lose focus on Suzanne here, because she is the most important part of this. And you guys, we're going to celebrate. Don't worry. We'll have a little celebration thing, but thank you. But I want to get back here to this poor soul here.
Well, one thing to understand about hunters is they have a favorite place of all times. Okay? As you can see this sign here, this area here is ripe for deer. But what's significant about this piece of property and all of these woods here, this is Barry Morphew's favorite place to hunt. This is his most significant area where he will go out into the forest and he'll hunt deer or animals. Okay? Now, interesting thing about hunters is when the hunting season comes along, they go out and they get their tag, but they also come out to the area where they're going to hunt, okay? And they mark that territory, okay? And then they'll come back during deer season, okay? And you'll actually, they tell you that they go through almost a physiological change. Their blood pressure increases, their pupils dilate, they get excited as they get closer to the hunt. Okay? Well, that's exactly potentially some of the things that Barry goes through when he comes to this piece of property and he gets out there by himself on the hunt. I ask myself, I wonder if Suzanne caught some of those feelings. I don't know. It's interesting though, for sure. So this is Barry's mom's house. And
that's where he's at right now. Notice there are no ribbons on any of the trees.
Definitely a warmer looking place than the childhood home, though, don't you think?
Yeah, she sold the childhood home and bought this house, and this is where he lives now.
Interesting.
What's weird though, if you go over to Suzanne's neighborhood, everybody's got yellow ribbons up.
Right.
You come over here.
Notice the woods right behind it. And those are the woods I was just in.
Those are the woods of his favorite hunting ground. They bought this house right in front of them. Thoughts?
Well, I mean, obviously, this is so central to this guy's psyche that, I mean, it's just a dead giveaway, that he needs it psychologically. And it's funny because if you think about it the way I was talking about it earlier, that you so can't handle loss that you have to regress into, it's almost like it's there for immediate access in case of any relationship problem. Like you literally could be like having a fight with mom, gotta go hunt, and you just like step outside into the. It's very, very interesting. It's clearly some kind of reinforcement for this guy's psyche. Is how it feels, but very, very interesting.
Okay.
Ready?
So Barry can literally walk out and go into those woods and go hunting. So I'm here at Roger Morphew's grave, Barry's dad. Being here in his town and Suzanne's town, where they both grew up, where they fell in love, they went to school together, I think Roger played a significant role in Barry's development as an adolescent as well as into his teenage years. This trip out here has really got me thinking about, did Roger play a more significant role in Barry's ultimate decisions? I just wonder what type of influence and what kind of pressures this man put on his son. As we think about this tragedy as a whole, I'm left wondering, is this a situation that just kind of got out of control? And is Barry responsible for Suzanne? I don't know, okay? But I'll tell you this, I am left with a lot more questions, again, than answers, okay? But I'm curious of what you think. Go ahead and tell me what you think. Put your comments down below. And thank you so much for following the interview room. Please subscribe, please share this video, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, so what are your thoughts about the pressure from adolescence on?
Well, I think, look, I mean, we're totally speculating here, but the clues suggest a person whose entire identity would have been wrapped up in being told, this is what you need to do to be a man, to be adequate, to be good enough, etc. And that paired with looking around that place and probably thinking, I'm not going to live and die in this dump, probably led to a person developing a kind of a narcissistic character structure where the idea was to kind of take emotions and stick them in a box and fight and do whatever you needed to do to please this dad figure, and then sort of earn your way out. That's the kind of person, where you, with every person, when I think about a person, whether it's a person I'm treating or a friend I know or a criminal or anyone else, I'm always trying to boil the person down to their most basic central motive. And you see immediately, the more you strip away at this individual, the more it becomes clear that the central goal, the central need for this person is advancement. That this is a person who associates advancement and ambition with worth, with self-worth and love and being good enough. And therefore, his downfall would be a kind of a pride, a feeling that he isn't in control or he isn't good enough or he isn't adequate. So that you, whenever you see someone with that kind of need, you immediately can predict the very thing that would most make the person fall. And it would be that not being good enough to that little voice that's probably always niggling in his ear, saying, you're not really quite good enough, are you? You don't really deserve love.
And that's interesting because in Suzanne's journals, right, where she's writing,
right,
you can almost see this progression of her falling out of love, or
yes.
because of, he said he's cruel, and she goes through this whole emotional response, and by putting it on paper.
Right.
And that's really what we're seeing also in the that's going to be my next show about, and I need you. You're going to have to be
Okay,
there.
of course. But
You know?
but Chris, don't you see it? The way I see it is that if a person thinks that the only reason somebody would love them, that somebody would love him, is what he achieves and his status, then the logic would be, if she doesn't love me anymore, I don't have those things to the degree necessary to attract her anymore. So I have to reassert dominance and control because that's what makes me attractive. Even to be attractive to somebody else, I would have to reassert that dominance and control because I'm not earning that love. But what the person paradoxically is not realizing is that probably the thing chasing the person off and making them not love you is that you're so caught up in that need that you're missing the humanity of them. And there's something so sad about that letter that you showed, because it showed that when he was not getting caught up in that crap and let his guard down, he sounded almost tender, that they were sitting and kissing and out and having these deep talks. And she probably felt, wow, I could connect to this human being.
I think she loved him
And
deeply.
she loved him. And I think the whole point is, because of whatever narcissistic crap is going on here, he might not have ever noticed that she loved him for something other than what he was. She loved him despite what he was.
But that's a deep thought, and I agree with you. No, I agree with you that he's missing the fact that somebody is loving him in his life. And do you think he was acting out by killing the animals? Because did he have a sense of love?
I think he was angry at his dad, and the animals were probably an expression of his hostility. My guess is Mother's Day is symbolic because that's the kind of love that he secretly always wanted.
Interesting.
A kind of a love that isn't transactional. And and that's the whole thing. And I just think if you see it that way, it doesn't excuse anything if this person's guilty, but it starts to make a lot of sense what might have gone on. And it's also interesting when you think about that the people that are still being supportive, the daughters being supportive, etc. What do you think about that? About the idea that the daughters still completely deny that there could have been any involvement? It's quite fascinating to me.
Yeah, me too. But I think they're trapped. I think there's a transition here. Do you think there could be a transfer of behavioral aspects that now they're picking up what mom was, that he's got them completely under his thumb?
Well, I think the point is that if you're dealing with a narcissistic controlling person, which is what people have said in the press, I'm not saying that myself, it's what people have said.
Right.
It's not uncommon for them to win people over like that. I think you're seeing that in the Koberger case, for example. I mean, you got half the country that thinks he's some kind of innocent, adorable person that they want to, make doodles of him with cats and hearts around him. I've seen crazy things, and they're in love with him. They're nuts about him. They think they want to be best friends with him, and and he may be guilty of a quadruple murder, right? So there is something about that, about how you project onto people, like you almost manipulate them into reflecting you the way you need to be seen, right? And protective and strong and long suffering and loving and whatever. But it may be that right under their nose.
I hope you get to interview him one day. I really do.
Oh, a lot of
that'd be fascinating to get him, to get some stuff out of his brain. But with this situation, he's not in custody, right? And everybody's innocent till proven guilty in the court of law. Same with Koberger. But Koberger is, he's in custody for 4 murders. Barry was in custody for Suzanne's murder, but it's kind of fallen apart. But it's kind of fallen apart because the judge did not allow 14 experts from the prosecution. He wasn't going to allow them to testify, which is just absolutely insanity. He gutted the entire prosecution's case. And so that's why we're continuing to do these little series here on this case again, it's going to be really, I'm going to tell what, the evidence is, what they were talking about and why they went after him the first time and hooked him up. And, we'll see what's going to happen the second time. And now that the daughters are now faced with a new dilemma,
Right.
i.e. they have their mom. I mean, what an irony, though, that if remains were to be turned back over to the family, he would be the first one to get them. I mean, I've never had a case ever. I mean, how strange is that? Of course, the ME is not going to do that because the bones are substantial evidence with the BAM, the chemicals in them. So the family will never get those bones. But can you imagine, her sister, her brother, who went out looking for her, and potentially the guy that they may think did this, they hand him her body, what's left of it. I know it's crazy.
Did he go to the funeral services or?
No, there hasn't been a funeral service. There's been a memorial, but remember, he was given the autopsy report first before Suzanne's family. And immediately they prepared a statement, and his attorney put the statement out about, how devastating this is, and they hope they find, the real killer of this individual. And I mean, they had it for, 3 or 4 days, so they prepared a statement, and it was all about nothing to see here, look the other way.
Here's an observation for you, Chris.
Yeah.
Now, this is total speculation, okay?
Yeah.
But if what you're dealing with here is a master hunter, would he really be able to tolerate not knowing who killed his wife without committing himself to hunting the guy down like an animal every day of his life until he was found? It doesn't match the psychology of his personality. That's exactly the kind of person who would say, that guy's not getting away from me. I will work to catch that dog until the day I die, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense? Right. Okay, but you don't see that behavior.
No, and in fact, the boyfriend, Suzanne's boyfriend from way back when, is still alive. Meaning, right, he lives in Michigan. Let's see here. Doctor, please explain the similarities and difference between three hunters, Lisk, Moscow, and Barry Morphew.
Oh, boy. Well, it's very interesting because if all three of these people are guilty, you've got a serial sexual offender in Lisk, you've got a mass murderer in the Koberger case, and you've got a domestic murder case in the Morphew situation. So you have all completely different motives, but at the center of each of them, a pathetic need for control and leveling the playing field against people from earlier in life. So it's the same underlying motive with a completely different expression. And if you put them on a spectrum, they would go, small scale in the house, Morphew, to smaller scale than serial killing, but doing it all at once in Koberger.
Where would they be on your scale? On the
all
scale?
Three of them?
Yeah, well, the differences, yeah.
If Heuermann is guilty, that's serial sexual sadism. We're not sure of the degree of torture that might have been asserted, but it does look like it was mostly a kind of like strangulation, tying, and things like that, which would fall into category 18, which is a category for sexually sadistic serial killers that engage in some degree of torture, but it's not exquisite and protracted. That would be a 22. So 18 for him. Koberger, if guilty, would be a 16 of the mastermind type, the type that is kind of aroused by the idea of committing horrendous acts and toying with people psychologically to feel superior to them intellectually. That's the same category where you'd find Zodiac and the Unabomber and people like that. And Morphew, if guilty, is a little tricky because it would depend on the motive if he's guilty. The motive would probably be jealousy, but it would be a jealousy murder that wasn't completely impulsive and explosive where the person immediately feels sorry and admits it and would never do it again. It's more the type with a little bit of plotting and scheming, but it goes a little overboard in an impulsive way. And that falls more into like a category 9. And people of that type do tend to have narcissistic character structures. They're not psychopaths, but they're narcissistic and controlling, right? The category 18, you're dealing with complete psychopathy. I mean, those are sadistic, psychopathic people. And with the category 16, you have a colossal ego, a completely colossal ego, to the point that people are essentially just objects in your game, your intellectual mind game. So I would say 9, 16, and 18.
Okay, everybody, get your copy of the book, and you can look up 18 or 9, 16, and 18.
Go 16 for whoever committed Idaho, and 9 for what I believe is the motive in the Morphew case. Yeah.
Okay. Get your copy of The New Evil on Amazon.
I know, that was my thorough answer.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. All right. Well, we have had them for almost just under 2. So, Dr. Gary, you get the closing word tonight, and then we're going to go to Hawaii.
Well, I'm happy to answer any questions people have.
Oh, yeah, sure. If we got any questions coming up here.
It looks like people are reading The New Evil. If they have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer, because it might inspire other people to go out and read it. Any questions, things that aren't making sense in the book, or that you want to sort of
let's see here.
Cases, or you want, if you want, we could do like 5 minutes of an Ask Me Anything You Want. I'm fine with that. But
yeah, ask Gary anything you want, and if I see it here, I'll pull it up here.
But then I think, it's a good time to close out. And
whoops, right here. Removable body parts fit any of those types? Any of the 9, 16, and 18?
Are they talking about the Morphew case, where there's that thing of the hands and feet potentially being?
Yeah.
Well, I've talked about this a little bit elsewhere, but one of the things I have studied extensively at Boston College with Ann Burgess and Victor Petrecka is mutilation, dismemberment cases. In fact, if you go into, people are asking me the funniest things about
or if you're single too.
That's hilarious.
I could say he's psycho, but no, I'm teasing. I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to let you answer all those things.
That's okay. Well, okay. So if you were to like look, for example, in Wikipedia, you'll see that the definitions of mutilation and dismemberment that are given there are created by me and Ann and Dr. Stone. And that we collaborated on those at the time we did The New Evil, because it bothered us that those terms were used interchangeably, and they shouldn't be. And you can see the distinction if you look there. This would be a dismemberment situation if the hands and feet are removed. And we found in our research that one of the main reasons for that kind of dismemberment, it's not disorganization or butchery for the, as an emotional expression. It has more to do with trying to get rid of identifying features of a body, fingerprints and things like that. The symbolism, of course, if Morphew killed his wife and removed her hands and feet, the symbolism, of course, would be that without feet, you can't run away, and without hands, you're helpless. And of course, the psychology of it is, then the person cannot be lost, right? You're in complete control of them because you've essentially hobbled them. And it's a disturbing image to think about it that way. But again, everything at a crime scene tells you a great deal about the psychology. If I saw a person without hands and feet, I would think this person was afraid of abandonment.
And if you guys have not heard the latest episode, we did on the Witness Box, that's our podcast with Josh Diaz from the lab. And we just did an episode on The New Evil and how it emerged through, society and how we got to where we are. So Dr. Gary really goes into depth on that. So you can get over there on any platform and you can hear that piece of it. So I know there was a question. Have you guys done anything about we should do a show on New Evil? We did that. Now the pelvis is missing too, right?
No, even more disturbing, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I thought that room was really bad. And this is Laura, everybody. This is our Laura is our new mod, and we want to welcome her. She's a fantastic human being. We're so grateful that she's here as part of the team. So everybody welcome Laura up here. So let's see. I may have another one up here, Gary, coming up.
Just out of curiosity, Laura, are you Scottish? Is Laura Scottish? Do we know?
I don't know. Let's see.
I'd be curious. Laura, tell us if you're Scottish. I'm just curious. I see the icon has ginger hair, so it's possible. But I don't know. I'm just curious because that's another one of those last names that fascinates me. Because I'll tell you what it means if you're interested. But yes, Scottish. See, yeah, there you go. That. Do you know what it means, Laura? What that last name means? I'm curious.
I'm afraid to
I'm a
ask.
big fan of genealogy. It's a Scots name that essentially means it's like a war. It's like a thief in battle. It's a person that pulled victory from the jaws of defeat. It's like a person who in the last minute wins the battle. It's a word we sorely need in English. But I think it's a very cool last name. Yes. See that. But anyway, Laura, I thought you find that last name cool. But I'm very interested in
what do you think is the missing pelvis?
Oh God.
Where could that go?
I can't help but think that I don't know, Chris. I have no idea because there are all kinds of weird idiosyncrasies to what people take, and also keeping bones and things has had a trophy significance for this person. So we don't know what that means. But remember our finding that it tends to have to do with eliminating the things that could identify a person and get a person caught. So we don't know what the pelvis signifies there. I have no idea. I mean, but think about it a little. There might be some identifying thing that may have been left there. I don't know, but I'm sure it has a meaning. I'm sure it has a meaning. What are people saying here?
So you got another one.
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't remember. I'll look it up for you and I'll tell you. I promise I'll look it up. Write to me, and I'll tell you what I find in my books here. Oh, they're talking about Jennifer Doulos. It's a very interesting thing. I know someone who very dearly, who is extremely close to the Doulos family, and so I know someone who was really, really destroyed emotionally by that case. That's such a terrible story. But that's a good example of a mutilation case where it has a lot to do with trying to get rid of evidence and all that, because she was really apparently butchered to hide her. So it's a defensive process for some of these people. But yeah, I want to give a little thought to the pelvis. People have it's an interesting question. Anything else here? Let's see. All right, don't hit the pelvis. I don't know. I'm sure it has something to do with evidence.
Well, Albie, we love you. Thank you for being with us for over 3 years.
Chris, do you want to address, because it really bothered me, and I like the answer you gave before the show. Do you want to address for people the idea that there's this DNA that has supposedly been traced to someone? Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because when I heard it, before I heard your explanation, I was very troubled by it, and I think it would help the audience a great deal based on what I'm reading here.
Well, and just before, the last episode that we did, I talked about, I broke the DNA concept down. There's pluses and minuses, right? And the DNA in of itself around the bicycle, obviously I showed some video where the officer wasn't wearing gloves, and there's a whole bunch of problems, with that. The officer made a mistake. I mean, it's that simple. And I'm sure that young man is going to, step up and say, yeah, I made a mistake. So the bicycle's not a problem. What everybody's going to jump on, and which the defense is already jumping on, is the DNA in the car near the glove box. Here's the problem with that DNA. I don't think that DNA is going to be associated with Suzanne's disappearance in any way, shape, or form. The number one reason is he parked the car back in the doggone garage. Number one. Okay. And she's on a bicycle, allegedly. Okay. And so that, you have to ask yourself, well, wait a minute. If this guy's going out of his way to, if he's a RSO and he's going to go out and follow her and, hit her with the dart and take her off the bike and dump her helmet somewhere, well, why is all of her stuff, in the car, number one, like your driver's license or credit cards, etc. And then, well, why is he in the car? Okay. And if he's driving her car, which is the defense's theory, then why does he park it back at the house after the crime, after dumping her body and burying her, in what they call the boneyard down there, where she lives? They literally call that area the boneyard, where all kinds of animal carcasses are. And by the way, that's one of the best places to hunt bull elk in that same area. So I'm not worried about that. And the DNA in of itself is like secondary, that it's, there's a line of that DNA, if you follow it, that's associated to somebody within that DNA that's a RSO. So it's not a direct link to an RSO. And you can bet the authorities by this time, by this point, have lifted that person's, shoe size. They know everything about that guy if they've identified that person.
Right.
Okay. And we would be hearing all kinds of things about that.
So, Chris, is it possible that there would be new charges?
You know what? They dismissed it without prejudice. What I'm going to be curious, Gary, is to see what court they file them in, because her body was found in a different county. Even though they turned over certain things back to Chaffee County, the judge in the first trial, he gutted the case for the prosecution. I mean, there were 16 witnesses or 16 experts, and the judge, cut 14 of them out.
Right.
Cut 14 of them out. I mean, who does that?
Yeah.
Having spoken with John Douglas, I understand the toll it takes to do what you do, and I'm extremely grateful for your insight.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate that, JK. And I don't know if you knew, but John is the one who started the Cold Case Foundation with Greg Cooper. And so he's our executive director emeritus, and he's going to be at CrimeCon coming up at the end of the month in Nashville. And somebody needs to ask him who he's trained. And you'll find there are some people that aren't trained by John Douglas. I'm not a profiler. My deal was I'm a homicide investigator, and I was trained in behavior analysis. Right. I know. Exactly. So we'll go from there. So the CCF, the Cold Case Foundation, we are always grateful to be, playing a role in many, many other murders. And we've got a couple of that, Gary. I know that we can't talk about them, but
No.
we've got some really interesting stuff happening around with the foundation.
Absolutely. And just before we go, I'll answer that. I looked quickly, and the answer to the question of what Shelton means is it simply means shelf town, which means a town that was on like a ledge of cliff. That it means that the people came from, some kind of little living area that was that. And somebody else asked about the last name Chambers, which is a famous one that simply means your ancestors worked, literally taking care of some kind of private chambers of someone, like a maid or a servant would take care of. Chambers was a common name for people who did that. But since people ask, I'll answer. Does Dr. Gary think this control would have started early or progressed? In which particular case? In the Morphew situation? Oh, I think that people who have a high need for control develop that because of something in the stability of their relationships at a young age. Yeah, there you go with the 200,000. Yeah, I think that starts very young, because when a person is formulating the basic ability to believe that love objects are permanent, that is when the person is most terrified. Because if your father or whatever mother doesn't love you, you'll be left out in the street. You'll die. So you formulate that way before puberty, and that's why people of that type don't tend to be interested in a romantic relationship, even on a purely sexual level. It's more primitive than that. It's about predictability. Will you love me tomorrow? That kind of thing, right? That the predictability of the relationship is more important, because it dates all the way back to the little kid days. By the way, I won't be at CrimeCon. I wasn't invited this time.
No, no lie.
Wants to do a GoFundMe or something, I'll be happy to jump on a plane. But I didn't get invited this time, because last time I was invited because I was on an oxygen show and there was a panel. Listen, I'm sure I'll be there again in the future. Chris, are you going?
No, I wasn't invited either. So, I'm so busy anyway. I mean, I'm going 100 miles an hour anyway.
That's all right.
Um,
We'll keep people entertained who aren't at CrimeCon. We'll have an episode.
Greg talked to John though, and he broke away. But you're going to tell everybody about Anne and her life story. Those that just came in. We've got 2,100 people here right now.
Oh, sure. Well, in July, there's going to be a series on Hulu called Mastermind, which is the story of the life of Dr. Burgess, my research partner, my dear friend, who was very instrumental in the early, like in the serial killer study that was done at the Behavioral Science Unit, and when that was founded by people like John Douglas, and headed that work. You're all going to be familiar with names like Hazelwood and Ressler and all that, and was, it's very interesting because she was like the lone female, really, who's in there, and she's very unsung, I think, and very humble. And so this show is going to deal with things like what was it like to be a woman in that kind of institution, in an era which was totally male dominated, things were male dominated. And there she is teaching them, teaching these guys at the FBI to understand what happens to female victims in sexual assault, and what is said to them, scripts that are used by offenders, things like that, subtypes of assault, because she was learning it from victims that she and Linda Holstrom were studying and working with in the hospital in Boston. And I'm there because, as somebody who's worked frequently with her, they wanted me to be someone that can kind of give historical context to her story. So they did a lot of filming, and I don't know how much of it they used. I only know that I was told I am in every episode. And then when what's happening is that it's being debuted at the Tribeca Film Festival, I think next month, and so I will be there with Anne and her family. The show debuts in July, but the Tribeca Film Festival, I think, is in June. And so I will be there. We'll be all, I guess I'll be all done up to the nines or something with Anne. And
you better get your fancy duds, man.
Kind of like a Muppet, with a little tie or something. But those two old guys in the Muppets that sit up in the boxes and but I think it'll be interesting, and and I'm honored because I feel Anne feels like family to me. And so, and in the meantime, I really do want to congratulate you, Chris, on the 200,000 subscribers. That is no mean feat. If you look around at a lot of these podcasts, they've got years to go before they could even remotely catch up.
Well, we've got, look at the chat. We're blessed. Marlena, she's been with us from day one, and our mods have been here from day one, and our subscribers. We just keep getting blessed. God opens a window.
Give people good stuff, and that's and don't worry about not getting invited to CrimeCon. As a wise person once said, popularity is the hallmark of mediocrity. In the meantime, I will also say that if you've got 200,000 subscribers, then there are a lot of people who could shift over and listen to the podcast we're doing, the Witness Box. And based on the numbers, only a fragment of people are going over there. And so I really do hope that people do. You will get very hooked on it. I have to tell you, when I listen back to those episodes, I really think they're of a high caliber. Josh Diaz does a beautiful job of tidying them up and making them very professional. And he's very gifted, very kind soul, very bright. And it's a joy for me to work with him and Chris. But I really think you guys will fall in love with the podcast. Give it a listen, and you'll never stop. And what do you think, Chris? Don't you think they'll get hooked?
Yeah, you'll enjoy it. We're hoping that we're bringing you content that it's just not in the box. We try to think out of the box, and I mean we're really way up there. So okay, my son is doing great. Thank you, Lollipop. You're so kind.
Oh, that's
In fact, he called Mom today. What a good guy. Called Mom, wished her, happy Mother's Day, and said he's doing wonderful. So we'll see. Well, we love that little guy, and I call him a little guy, but he's 20, and he's out and about, conquering the world. All right, Mr. Gary, Dr. Brucato, Gary Brucato, I love you. Thank you so much, always for being here.
Call me whatever you want, but just don't call me late for dinner. As they used to. Remember that expression?
Yes,
but, I grew up saying that one.
What my partner used to say to me when he left? We were partners for 7 years. Out of my 13 in homicides, I spent 7 of them with him. At the end of every day, he would look at me and goes, "Hey, if I don't see you tomorrow," I go, "What?" And he goes, "So what?" So, all right, everybody, we love you. Okay. Be kind. Continue to be kind. Let's remember the people of Maui from the fire, the people who are suffering in the Middle East, and also the people who are suffering around the world. If we can just, do what's the old saying, the greatest exercise we'll ever do is lift somebody else up. If we can lean out and lift up, that'll be great. And hopefully the situation will resolve itself in the Middle East. I put a post up on my community page, a real interesting interview with Dr. Phil and Netanyahu. I thought it was it's pretty deep. So anyway, love you all. Have a great day. Aloha, and see you on the next one. Let's go to Hawaii.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away. You and me go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.